And now we're in game. Okay, good, cool. But yeah, so I picked a couple countries to do, and so those are what I did. What is the last country I did? I can't remember. But there was another moon country, party country that I'm blanking on right now. And I just did like 6 events, and then there was also an event for dwarves in the Empire, elves in the Empire. And then you get one of 5 different events at Fire if you're for anyone, and you have like a follow-up event. Maybe I don't think it was Silver anyway. But it was a lot of fun, and I think I really enjoyed it. The writing process, because doing those different events let me also do like a bunch of different styles. Because I don't know, maybe the Ishtalor got removed by part of the Ishtalor rework. Actually, I have no idea. Maybe you still get it, maybe you don't. But you know, like, the Ishtalor one was like a quite hopeful one, because it was basically about them being the second silver family of the Empire. And then kind of like embracing, you know, a forward momentum to put things right. Whereas, say, the Laurent one was like, you know, we've eaten too much off, we're doing too well, you know, things are struggling. And so it was a lot of fun experiencing a lot of different tones. And that's something I guess I'd recommend to people, is that when you start developing or if you're interested in a setting, taking that chance to really explore everything and to look around, I think is one of the most best things you can do, because it really helps you find like the stuff you want to write, both from like where your interest is, but also like what you can write. You know, like because at least for me, that there are different genres I find more or less easy to write. But yeah, I don't know if you have any questions or follow-ups. Obviously, I've been speaking for a while, and like you can
Oh no,
get through
no,
those
it's
before
fine.
carrying on.
This whole
Okay.
thing's about going over your journey, so don't feel bad at
Yeah,
all if you start going off.
that's true.
But
But
no, those events, you might say you were overwhelmed at the time, but they're a great introduction into the region and the specific country's reactions to what's going on. So
also, but yeah, so it was really interesting to me. And I really enjoyed that process. Then I ended up doing 2 national ideas in Sahul. I did as part of the other onboarding, because like I mentioned, I put off the spreadsheet for too long because I was so nervous about it. I ended up doing 2 different countries' national ideas as my first task that actually got me onboarding for being finished. And those were for Zatal, which is a really small country just to the east of Ryaz, at least on this map right now. Because if you look at the lizard folks, yeah, just to the east of Ryaz. That's west, sorry.
oh,
Um, it's like a purplish one. Yeah, this one with the one. Yeah, I did the national ideas for them, and they're like crocodile lizards. And they're crocodile lizards. They're a lot of fun. They have quite a funny thing, because one of the modifiers I picked for them, I think, is the only example of it being used in fourth tome, and so there wasn't a baseline for it, and so I put one down. And I think last time Chinkito and Poke, who are both members of our whole core, looked at it, they were like, "That's too low. This should be much higher." And I was like, "Yeah, probably," but no one was able to correct me at the time. But I was really interested in them, and they were open, and I was just like, "Well, this will be fun to do some writing here for them," and so. I was working with Brosa then, and who was really helpful. And for the events, sorry, in Kano, I was working with Armon before. Actually, Armon was my writing reviewer, but I was working with Chrono and Adri for my region review. So I was really blessed to have some really good people involved in region reviewing stuff with these stuff. And I also did Karask, who are like on the coast. I don't know if you've ever played them. They're going to get a mission tree, I think, next update. I think they
I
got
believe they
pushed
have
back
one
from this
now.
one.
I believe
Didn't
they
they get?
got one with
I thought it was pushed back at this update, unfortunately. Maybe if I'm wrong, you know, they're a fun
Maybe I
tag.
was looking at the bit bucket. Oh, I guess I was looking at the bit bucket.
Yeah, I
That's
think it was
fine.
just a bit. Yeah, but hopefully very early next update. But they had some placeholder national ideas that were like one sentence with some explicit stuff saying, "Oh, please fix this later on." And it hadn't been fixed, and this was like just after the Arius transition or Oirus
Oh,
I always cycle between how to pronounce that. You know, I don't always say like Arus. But he just become lead, and he like was like, "Hang on, this needs to be done. Someone please do this." And so I volunteered to do them because I was quite interested in them, and I thought the short lines that there had been were quite interesting, and I kind of expanded them. So all of these were originally one-line placeholders. Again, I think from Brosa. I just expanded them. And you know, I enjoy talking about them. Karask are definitely a quite brutal country compared to Vital. Their mission tree it took it in an even more brutal direction than I would have gone. But I mean, Sahol Core wanted it, and I think it's a really interesting direction because they kind of they react to failing by getting worse, which is always a fun arc, right? Like, especially
It's
in an
always
empire building game. Yeah.
it's always fun to see nation spiral.
Yeah, exactly. And they normally die very early on. Like these two wars they're starting, you couldn't win them quite easily as a player when I last did it, but as the AI, I don't think I've ever seen Karaks do well because it's just so easy for the other countries to beat them.
Well,
But so yeah.
I'll tell you, me playing as a Karshir, they did pretty well when I play as one of the nations.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, I think I think the main thing is like, well, with Karsh, what you need to do is like a lot of like the galley baiting in terms of
Oh
like
yeah.
blocking them off so they get stack white. Yeah, but no, but yeah, so I did those two, and then I finished off. And then after doing those two, I kind of went back and like said to myself, no, I need to do these events in Canada. I need to get these done for the update. And I just kind of like I don't want to say crunched it because crunch is quite unhealthy, but I just kind of really blocked it out and was like, let's do these, let's get this going. And at that point, having done two ideas and events, I was onboarded for the next update. And kind of, I think just as we were slowing down for the Sarhall update, but kind of early enough that I could get it in, I started prepping for a country in SCAN. Funnily enough, I actually failed with my first SCAN country I wanted to do missionary for. My themes got rejected, which it didn't take horribly, if things happen. But I was really interested in Wyvernheart, in the Brave Brothers, and most of what I did didn't really come of anything. But luckily, Wolfhorn, who's a good friend, I consider a good friend, he ended up coming along and doing Wyvernheart eventually, and he did something way more interesting than I was ever going to come up with. But that's a good example of how there's a lot of people I think do really well from the start, and unfortunately, I'm not one of those stories. And so I'm quite proud of sticking out. But yeah, so I think it's something people can learn from that. Not everything's going to go exactly how you want it to go in the beginning.
Well, I'd say you're doing pretty well now, though.
I'd like to think so too. But yeah, so I was doing Brave Brothers, and so I did like a pitch for them. And one of the issues was this is something you might find a fair bit if you ever come into Anbennar development, and it's something I definitely think we could. One of the areas I've tried to improve the most as a lead or when I was at the core is that there was a bit of confusion as to whether Wyvernheart should be a good guy tag or a bad guy tag. And most of it stemmed from a couple of comments in J that got misinterpreted and then passed along both ways, meaning that people would constantly be, unsure of kind of what to do, if that makes sense. They would go back and forth, and there were some issues. And so I put together a proposal. I was working with someone else at the time. I've actually forgotten their name, unfortunately. But and we were trying to do these themes. They just eventually got to a point where, even though they were kind of like semi-interesting, they were just not what Life and Heart was meant to be about. And so I ended up abandoning them. And so I took a short break, which is I think another thing I'd recommend people is that there's nothing wrong with like stepping away from modding or Anbennar or anything you're interested in a creative pursuit and just kind of stepping back and coming back to it after a break. And I was like, well, I want to do something in SCAN still. SCAN's quite interesting to me. And so I looked at the onboarding sheet as it was back then. Unfortunately, it's now a bit defunct. I don't know if I could find the old Canner onboarding sheet, but it looked differently. We'll leave it there. And so it had a bunch of stuff about what does Canor want to see, and one of the tags on there was Covenblad, and I was really interested in it. Because its tagline, I don't know if you've ever played it, but its tagline was Darth Revan Mage Knights or something. Have you ever played KOTOR?
I have played KOTOR, yes. It's been a little
Yeah,
bit,
and
but
yeah, so it's quite fun. I really like KOTOR. I'm I need to cough and drink for a second. Give me a second. KOTOR, just for people that might not be familiar, actually, I'll say Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is a very classic BioWare RPG. Well, I'm not going to spoil the twist, but part of the premise of the game is basically that there's these Jedi, they're fighting Sith. It's HK-47 when they're canons. Yeah. But they're kind of fighting each other, and one of the things that was kind of meant to be a cause of this was that in this previous war waged by these people called the Mandalorians, who obviously now are quite famous. You know, they have a TV show about them with Pedro Pascal and stuff. You know, so it's yeah, it's definitely it's a fun one. But you know, some of the, and obviously they come from like Boba Fett and whatever. But you know, they meant to fight a war against the Old Republic, and essentially the Jedi had this big vote about should they intervene or not, and the Jedi Council was like, no, things are just going to go badly wrong if we intervene. You know, it's going to lead everyone down the dark side. It's not going to be happy fun times. But then a number of Jedi go anyway. You know, among them being the person that becomes Darth Revan. And so that's the whole premise of the Sword Covenant, is that basically they're part of the Order of Aldrasia, who are over in the Forlorn Vale, who are kind of knights dedicated to protecting the Emperor, and who their kind of whole job is to protect people, but also to protect the Emperor. And they had this big conclave where it's like, you know, what should we do about this green tide, right? Is a Mandalorian Wars equivalent. You know, and just like in, you know, Star Wars, the majority of people decide, you know, they're going to stick it behind an Escan, whereas half of them, or just under half, just say, actually, no, you know, we're going to do what we think is the right thing. We're going to go and fight. And so that's one of the, and obviously it does not go as well as you'd like. So that's kind of one of the things that kind of was behind them, is that essentially you have this narrative of a country that starts off with good intentions but kind of goes wrong. And yeah, as we can see, the Hovenbladig missions. I'm still mostly proud of these, but there are definitely you know, there are definitely some faults here and there. I think yeah, there's small disagreement leads to conflict. Chief among these, symmetry. So this is it, which is as part of the story of Covenblad. We'll talk about it. We can talk about it a little bit. But in the MT making MT guide, it was like symmetrical trees are to be avoided, but are not fully banned. And I was like, well, I think the symmetry works for this. It kind of makes it feel a bit like an RPG where you kind of, especially like a BioWare RPG was kind of my premise, where if you've played one of them, typically a BioWare RPG, you know, you go to a number of core zones, but they all loop back to one point or another. You have to do these story critical missions to carry on the plot of the game. And that's kind of what was going through my head when I was doing this. And in case it needs to be said, map games are not RPGs, and this does not actually work out quite as well as you'd like it to in premise. I mean, yeah, Magli, like this did literally get symmetry banned. In case people aren't familiar, originally the guide said heavily discouraged, and when Arius was kind enough to help playtest this MT, he almost immediately, the content lead at the time, people aren't familiar, he immediately changed the making MT guidelines document to say, no, don't do this ever, it's fully banned. Which is correct. Like, I should be clear, I don't want to be all about it, and it's one of the funny things that when he announced this, I messaged him to say sorry, and he messaged me back to say, like, oh no, I was going to tell you, don't feel bad about this. You know, it's your first MT. You know, we all make mistakes. This is to make sure it doesn't go wrong again. But that should give you an idea of how, you know, there's a reason why it's been banned, symmetry, and why we've kind of moved on from things. But also, you know, that. But yeah, so and this was interesting because there was a lot of things I liked about the Cosmoblade MT still. Like, I still play as a comfort MT because at the end of the day, kind of when you make your own MT, you're often going to make an MT that plays how you'd like to play, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And it's, I think, one of the most, yeah, I think it's one of the most rewarding parts of making MTs if people are ever interested in like stepping up to the task, is that if you have a favorite country and you can make its MT, then you can make sure your favorite country plays like how you'd always want it to play. And so it's a very like power trippy thing. But yeah, so and that's kind of one of the things I enjoyed about it was, and also you can't quite see this right now, but this actually maybe if you can you go to the estates view if that's all right?
Sure.
I want to see if some of the, because I'll answer there's some questions. Go to Under Sword Covenant. Can you click on there and can you scroll through and try and the privileges? Can you try and scroll to the bottom? Yeah, just to see. Yes, this. Yes, these were made. Yes, these are some unique privileges that were made with the MT. They were all done by Helgi, who is phenomenal. And this is one of the things I've been most blessed with actually is that not many people get to have their first MT have Helgi art and to get 5 different or 6 different pieces because he did each of the estate privileges and the government view. I'm like so grateful to him that he was interested and inspired enough to kind of. There's a government. Is it called like the Covenant Arbiters? I think it's in Gov Reforms. But yeah, I think it's part of the that mission. I don't know how easy it'll be to unlock it, but I put out the call for artists, and he came along, and he's fantastic. And the art for these are all in color, which you can't see before you unlock them, but it's really good. And so that's one of the other things I think that
No,
it's a yeah. So you go ahead.
no, definitely. It's always nice seeing this very good art.
Yeah, and
And
I think and they'll have the tooltip to say, because basically how it works is that you set a flag when you do the different missions for each of the chapters, which you have some of the names for here: the Broken Chain, the Silver Reliquary, the Burning Sword, the Young Dragon, the Black Tree. And they kind of unlock themselves, and then later on, actually, one of the things I think is quite interesting from like a a tech perspective, if you scroll down to the bottom, is that a bit more actually. Yeah, I think maybe a bit more. I'm not sure. Yes, these ones is that do you play Hearts of Iron 4 at all?
I have in the past.
And so would you be familiar with what I said when I talked about like national focus trees and how
Yes, definitely.
mutually exclusive focuses? So this final row here, the second to last one, because EU4 doesn't natively have mutually exclusive focuses, if you look at the effects of each of these, they essentially act as mutually exclusive focuses, because when you complete one of them, the other one gets completed by mission on the sides. And it basically makes sure when something gets completed by effect or by console command, you actually don't get the rewards from them. And so that's one of the things I did here that it's not that complicated, but I'm still kind of happy with in terms of being able to like show off these this kind of final choices you have, because that was also like one of the RPG-esque aspects I wanted to do too, was to have like in Mass Effect there's Vermeer, in Dragon Age Origins there's all these different stuff at the end, that classic Bioware RPG feel. Obviously Mass Effect and Dragon Age were kind of the spiritual sequels to KOTOR. And it's quite funny though, because it does mean that the very last mission doesn't actually really have that much of a power reward. Magic Ruling Man, which is a Dragon Age reference. Kiva just mentioned that. I thought I'd. But this is actually it gives you 400 splendor and an event, or well, the event gives you that, and that's meant to basically signify that your true capstones were the last 2 missions. But a design lesson here, I'd say to people, is that people frequently give feedback that they don't get why the capstone doesn't give more, because the nature of how it's done, people will still expect this capstone to give something. And so even though, from my point of view, the capstone rewards like in the choices prior, then here this is something where I think it's something people can learn about in terms of like how something gets received, is that it is the last thing that will stick with you. And it sounds a bit obvious, but I think it's interesting in terms of it's always nice to be reminded of the basics, I suppose, is the way I put it. And from an out of game perspective, Coven Blood was also a bit of a labor of love. I think I mentioned that we're going to potentially do a stream next week or something with Kat and talk about this some more. But one of the final things I'd mention is that in terms of recommendations and understanding of like what it means to dev, is that I actually nearly didn't get this in the update it came out in, because I sort of ended up taking annual leave by accident from my work because I had too many days left and they couldn't let me carry over so many that I had to take a whole week off. And that ended up being the week before the update. So I'd basically spend like I think 4 or 5 hours coding code from that every day of that week to get into the PR deadline and the writing deadline. Which I don't regret, but it definitely did take a lot out of you. And I think that's one thing that I'd say to people is that can be very tempting, but don't do it. Like really, you should just take your time with things, helping at the play testing it needs. But that is something that I think, is also something I think is unfortunately inevitably going to be a do as I say, not as I do. Yes, exactly. Because I learned this lesson. Every MT I've done since then has been well before the update deadlines. But basically everyone is going to make this mistake at least once. But I'd just say, but yeah. So so Coven Blade was my first MT. I actually ended up getting a second MT out that update, which I kind of did in a similar fashion to the national ideas of the events. I picked this MT up basically to build up my confidence to do Covenblad, because I think Covenblad has 40 missions. I'm not, or maybe like 35. But put it this way, for a first-time mission tree, it's quite a lot, especially because I was still getting back into the swing of things in terms of like coding and like coding practices. So one of the things I did is I picked up Salaran, who are like way over in Royalsard in Laurent in Lankanor. There was a mission tree being made for Salaran by a person called Spore Menzek. But who did a Bianfang, for instance, if people are familiar with that one in Hellas, the China LARPers, yeah, they're quite fun. But basically I'm not quite sure what happened, but he ended up not having enough time to do them, and so this was actually being I have no idea if that's how it's pronounced. Some guy named Darkstar. I just kind of I've never, but it'd been stopped. It stopped at content review. He'd pinged Susurrus, who was in the chat earlier, for instance. And Susurrus had come back being like, "Here's my first round of feedback," and kind of a Canor core call, which I guess we should probably go back to actually. But this had been mentioned. It was such a small mission tree, and that we would want to get this finished, and let's have someone pick it up. And I kind of volunteered myself because I was like, let me get another coding project under my belt.
Was it?
Yeah.
Was this before or kind of like parallel to Coven Blad?
It was parallel to Covenblad. We'll probably talk about this more in the other stream if we do, but Covenblad had a very rocky content review, which was almost entirely my fault, and definitely something that I would highly recommend people avoid. It ended up going through about 16 different rounds of content review. And I bear in mind that's more than most mission trees have of rounds of review total. So it was definitely. So this is one of the reasons why Covenblad turned out the way it did. But I think it's. But that was kind of, and that stalled for a bit, and so I kind of went to Salaran, and I ended up pinging Susurrus back about this. Yeah, 16. That was just for content. I ended up pinging Susurrus back, and Sus was like, "Oh no, we'll actually hand this over to one of our newer content reviewers at that point, who ended up being Magniv, who is in the chat and replying right now, who is now a content lead." So it had a similar journey to myself. I don't know if he remembers this, but he ended up being assigned to this. And so we ended up fleshing it out, changing a few things about the initial draft. And obviously this isn't much. This is 8 missions, because the column 5 here, the rightmost column.
Yep.
Those were like generic missions that everyone can get. And so we just ended up like kind of finishing off these 8 missions that Spore had made. And we finished this off and pushed it out, and I was quite happy with it. It was a very small MT. It just helps you get to Royalsard. But it's just about like one guy. This one has another funny development story, which is that when I first played this tag, it didn't have a defined ruler, and I rolled a 666, and I was in disbelief that this could be possible. Because obviously, if you're not familiar, you can roll anything as an average ruler. But I rolled a 666, and I was like, this person must be canon. There's no way I just rolled on a random test run a 666. So what ended up happening was that I was like, well, we should probably have a set ruler here. So I ended up making one. I took the same name from my randomly rolled ruler. And this is why he probably has higher stats than he should, because I had to be persuaded down from giving out a 666. I know, exactly. I'm on my co-lead, who was the sole canon lead really in most of the time. He's a cruel and voracious person in this regard. Vicarious.
Everyone take that to note.
No, yes, please, yeah. Well, obviously, it's eminently reasonable. But yeah. So that's an example of like funny development stories you can have. Is you do some random testing, you find something out you don't realize, and then you kind of do a little bit more content on top of it. So yeah, Salaran gets an event, not necessarily Royalsard, about if you want to accept some vampires coming or not, and you can say yes or no. You either choose +1 stability, or you gain the vampire estate. So it's not only the missions, it's kind of a bit silent. But yes, you do get vampires, and they aren't really integrated into the mission tree, partially because the way the vampire states work, you're locked into the nascent state for 20 years when vampires first appear in your country, and you probably will be finishing most of the MT in 20 years. I didn't know about how to. I probably could have. If honestly, looking back on it, I think if I wanted to include vampires, I could have done more with it. But again, this was basically me taking somebody else's work, adjusting it slightly, but basically just getting it over the line, and it hadn't included vampires before. But yes, that was everything I did for that update. At the same time, that was when I took kind of my next step up to become a Canal Core member, which I don't know if I probably I can just take a drink. We probably should explain a little bit about that if people aren't familiar with like the development structure we have
Sure,
in
yeah.
Anbennar. I guess I'm curious about like if you want to go ahead because I'm curious about your perspective as a moderator, as someone who 'cause that's kind of a parallel structure, but I'm really interested how you see it.
How I see it? Well, I guess how I see it is that developers who you don't need to specifically focus on a certain region, but especially for our EU4 developers, if you've worked in a region a lot, you've shown a an understanding of some general lore in the area, you've shown dedication and a lot of interest, and you've worked in the area for a long time. Um, you can be elevated to a core member who has some higher, I guess, decision-making roles in that region's development, and is able to influence. Well, is also tied into the work going on there. Made aware of reviews and stuff like that. Not as a, not necessarily as a reviewer, but just as a someone to pass by. Is that
Yeah.
a general good idea, or am I missing something out big, or misunderstanding something big?
No, I think I would agree with that characterization. And basically, it's very much like an opt-in thing,
Oh yeah.
where for the most part you show an interest in a region, and if you kind of have shown that interest, and you can kind of point to the things you've done, you just ask to join the core team. Like, oh look, we've got a new fancy badge in the chat. Everyone go and give Carquin a hug, okay? I heard this yesterday when he turned up to a Canal Core meeting. Carquin deserves hugs. He's one of our 3D artists, and so very frequently in high demand. But yeah, sorry. But yeah,
Sounds
so
good.
I remember it vividly actually how I asked to be Canal Core because I've been really interested in helping out because one of the things I suppose that really drove becoming a lead and kind of getting more involved in development and something that I think is really cool when you see new people come in this mindset is wanting to help others be creative and kind of help them along the way. I've got two of my friends in my IRL D&D group who I introduced to D&D when we were in sixth form, are both teachers, so they rub off on me a lot when it comes to kind of looking to help other people and kind of
Kind of like
shepherd creativity.
raising the next. I don't know if you call it a generation, but next wave of developers.
Yeah, the next wave, maybe the next Deep Space Nine, too, as well as the next generation. But terrible jokes aside,
No, it's all good.
but I think it's one of those things that we kind of have where I just really wanted to get involved and help people because I'd been helped through my early development a lot by my good experiences with talking with Brosa and Sahul, with working with Chronologic, who now has stepped back from core teams. He just does the wiki team, but he was really helpful to me. And also Adri Zaya, who was a moderator at the time. Actually, she eventually stepped back, but she was really helpful to me in terms of giving me a fresh start. And I really wanted to kind of pay that forwards. It was one of these things where what kind of once I'd gotten far enough with Cosmblad, I was curious about it, and what happened was that Sternson, who's a Canal Core member and at the time was head moderator, he was talking in one of the channels about how, if you want to do this thing, be the change you want to see, put yourself forwards. It was quite funny to me because I was like, I remember it really vividly because I was playing a video game. I was playing a game that I really enjoyed called Valkyria Chronicles 4. I don't know if
Oh
you've ever heard
yeah.
of this
Oh
series.
yeah, I love
It's
Valkyria
very,
Chronicles.
yeah, and, it's a series that can only be described as World War II anime aesthetics,
Oh
but with
yeah.
like period accurate music and like sound effects. Very strange combination. But I was playing through I remember I was playing through like one of the DLC missions of this because I was playing through the campaign,
Mm.
and so I was like tabbing out between rounds, because you like give orders. It's like semi-turn based, and I was tabbing out of it, and I saw Sternson say this, and I was like, okay, I've got to take my shot. I want to put myself forward and both get more involved, but ideally show that I want to be more involved. And so I just asked, pinged Canal Core. I asked, hello, can I please join Canal Core team? And that was the start of that. They put it up for a small vote, which is what I've now done as Canal lead. Whenever someone asks to be a Canal Core, I typically, with their permission, pass along the message they say if they DM me, into Canal Core, and I say, hi, this person would like to join, would people vote on it? And normally it's a lot of yeses, and sometimes unfortunately there do have to be some no's, but I think that's but it's a pretty good process where if you kind of show your interest in the region, it will be paid back to you. I don't know if that's similar to your story being a moderator at all in terms of um, kind of stepping up to the plate when you
Oh.
saw a chance to, because were you one of the more recent applications?
Uh,
I don't want to. Yeah, maybe I've just missed you all this time, and I'm really sorry if so.
I guess. Well, if you're talking in terms of like Stern, yeah, I guess I'm a bit more recent. I was it's 2 years ago at this point, I believe. I
No,
don't. I
that's
don't know,
plenty of time then.
but like you, I'd been in and out of the Anbennar server and Anbennar community. I tried my hand at deving a couple times, and well, nothing really came out of it. But now we have Tonga finally has content, and it's really good. So highly recommend playing that. Um,
Yeah,
not my mission tree though. And yeah, I don't know. Stayed in the server pretty constantly for a year and a half. So when the applications went out, I just decided to apply. Yeah,
yeah,
Tunga. I originally had tried to make Tunga like 3 times on and off, and let's just say nothing came out of that. Maybe some ideas were kind of lived on, but uh,
mm.
it's not my MT. Uh,
But I think it's really So we could say something more, so I didn't want to cut you off
no,
if you
no,
had.
no, no. That's pretty much. I don't want to keep going on about
No, no, it's fine.
my
Like,
multiple failures. Nah, it's all
yeah,
good. I see you in the chat, Magni. It's all good.
yeah.
I didn't do anything with it, so the fact that somebody might have done something with it, well,
I mean,
yeah.
that's part of development, though. Like, I think that's one of the good things is that, like, for instance, that's what happened to Covenblad a little bit. Someone else had tried to do it before, called Callet,
Hmm.
and I ended up looking at their themes because the basic response to it had been, these are cool ideas, but they need a bit more spice, which is an Anbennar specific flavor term we use a lot, which is basically like the differentiating factor, the thing that makes me go, why should I play this adventurer and not that
Mm-hmm.
adventurer? And so, I had to work with Cal a lot actually. Unfortunately, they got banned midway through development of Covenblad, so they
Ooh.
ended up, I kind of, yeah, it's one of those, and it's like, it's against server rules, so obviously you off-server development and stuff. So I kind of was a bit of a Boy Scout in terms of sticking to my in terms of sticking to myself, just to avoid. I didn't want to get in trouble. I was definitely one of and so I did most of it by myself at that point. But we all walk on the shoulders of giants, right? Like obviously you mentioned that just like me, you've been involved in the mod since the beginning, and I guess that's why you see all these old MTs when they were first made and they were amazing. Like I remember when I first played Laurent and Duran, they were the pinnacle of MT making. I loved them more than the vanilla MTs. And that's kind of stayed true compared to vanilla. It's just that both vanilla and Anbennar have improved,
No,
and so
definitely.
it's what Yeah, and I think that's I guess it's also why I'm a lot more rework averse than a lot of people, because I was there Gandalf, I was there. For, I was there when this got made. You could find some old messages from me talking about like some limited submodding, for instance, like I did for Vern, where just like Jeddah has some special cav units. I made like special units for Vern for the Wyverns instead of just like a static modifier, which was way too complicated. There's a reason why that we don't even do that in the rework of one that came out recently. But that just gives you an idea of like what it was like. And so that was my first MT and the second MT really. But I think the thing I'd say is like there's a lot of stuff that people pick up on when they work in a core team that you get a lot of chance. One of the reasons I recommend it to people, if you ever find yourself drawn to a region, is that you can kind of be a bit of a magpie with other people's ideas. You don't steal them, but by doing the process of review, you yourself are inspired. And I think that's one of the reasons I love doing so much review when I can, is that some of the most creative people who work in Canal, I love their ideas, and I never quite agree with everything they do, but I love what they do enough that I can go, oh, you did this here, but what if I did something slightly differently? And it's also that same like educating impulse for the next generation. It's so great to see someone come along who you help up and who you now consider to be like a peer, if not better. Like Wolfon, who I've mentioned already, for instance, who did Wyvernheart. His first non-bug report thing was helping me fix a Covenblad bug that was like or missing feature with the Palatine Arbiters, which are these if you haven't played Covenblad, you just get perma war wizards because you basically have like a shogun type figure instead of consort, and they'll constantly spawn as a war wizard. So you'll always have at least one war wizard when playing Covenblad. But my initial idea to make this hadn't worked out because there's this button called Make Consort into General that is actually a lot more weirdly coded than you might think.
Oh, wait.
And so in the other General tab, like there's like this one, but you can't. You have to be a female ruler to get the button to appear. It doesn't. There's no effect, or at least there wasn't at the time, and I think still no. There wasn't an effect to define consort into general. So everything I had planned to do for it just didn't work. And so we had to do a different proposal to like fix it and make it happen. And Wolfhorn was the person who came in to do that for me, and I'm very glad. And he ended up getting involved in more and more in Canor. He's done the Ascani refugee system, for instance, and then he joined Canor Core. I'm genuinely like working with him is always such a pleasure because we get on well personally, but it's also so nice seeing someone that you think does a great job and that you've helped kind of get into a good place, and that you've helped them through some of the rough patches. Because I think even though our bureaucracy helps the majority of people, there are always going to be some people that get left behind. And part of why you take on a mentorship role or you go to help people is to make sure that you know that as few people get left behind in aggregate as possible, so that the system works for the majority of people and keeps working. And Wolfhorn to me, like Magnew said in the chat, when he took on Wyvernheart, he even reached out to me for a little bit of my thoughts on how things had gone before, and I spoke to him earnestly, and then he just took these ideas and ran with it, and he's so good. Like it's a pleasure to work with him. If I had to name a flaw, it's that he's French. Unfortunately, he lives in Paris. So there's a lot of like ribbing that goes back and forth in terms of being British and French.
Well,
But that's yeah.
It's almost forgivable. It's almost forgivable with everything else.
But that's one of the things I like about it's a social aspect of deving too, right? That if you're ever interested in deving, it's a very social hobby. I'd compare it to like D&D and stuff, where yes, you are being sociable with like nerds, and it's not the same sociability as like going and playing five-a-side football on the weekends or something. But it's still something where you're going to make a lot of friends, a lot of people who, well, ideally anyway. And if you put yourself out there, you'll find people that respond to that and kind of uplift you in turn. And so if anyone in the chat is not a developer and has been interested in it, I really recommend, finding that one thing you're interested in and just kind of taking it and running with it. Like, I think it's so cool when you see someone step in for the first time. Like, I remember I'll name someone who I think is watching right now in chat, but Lord Lambert, who's a streamer obviously, but he I think came by the Discord one time to like report a bug or like do a minor contribution, and it was just like really cool seeing someone who you normally see interacting with the community by streaming games and playing it, do that little thing differently. It's the same with seeing anything. I think it's a really cool social thing, and and you also get like so many little hits of like what's the right phrase, like like the I can't remember what it's called, not adrenaline, but like the thing where you make you happy, endorphins. What's the right phrase
Endorphins,
for
yeah.
it?
I guess that's it.
Yeah,
Dopamine. Dopamine.
dopamine. That's it, dopamine. I remember the first time I saw someone else who's watching right now, Poimu, who did a playthrough of Covenblad, and the first time someone linked this to me, I was so happy. I commented on a bunch of those YouTube videos. Like it's something where I do really recommend. It's a very social thing. You get a lot of uplifting feelings when you make something, cool or that you enjoy, and someone out there reacts to it. It's really, it's very enlightening, and that's I think one of the things I'd mentioned about getting involved in dev and why I'd recommend it to people, or why I'd say that it's a good thing to kind of do and follow that journey on. It's so nice interacting with people and seeing the things that get inspired, because it's kind of that it's that reciprocal thing. I do something, you do something, and then we do stuff like these streams, right? None of that happens without an audience, but it's also that very audience that kind of gives you that strength to keep going. I think it's good.
Oh yeah, it's great. I've always admired the community, the dev community, and how tight they seem together. You know, sometimes there's some rough patches, but y'all usually are very supportive of each other and bring each other up.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think and that's one of the joys of reviewing and stuff, and that's kind of where I end up taking my next step, and kind of I guess we'll go for a little bit of that
Sure,
journey,
yeah.
is that like
You're
becoming a lead.
lead and reviewer. Did you want to go through? We went a bit through reviewing,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you wanted to go through that more. Just go right to your lead adventure.
Well, I think it kind of goes together, but like for
Okay.
reviewing, I've been doing reviewing for a couple updates, and like I said, I really enjoy it. It was something where I got started just before Scions of Sarhol came out, and then and I just reviewed so many mission trees that I've really enjoyed seeing. Like for instance, someone else who I really get along with quite well, called Experiments. He's very big on Vicky Free. He did one of the interviews about it ages ago during Dev Clash, for instance. And he did Kobold fan, who are obviously the Kobolds crazy. So many Kobold fans, you see them all over the place. Obsessive, I think, is a bit derogatory, but they're quite passionate, right? And the Kobold fans, they're wild. And he came through with a proposal to rework the Kobold Fan MT, because it used to look different than this, obviously. And now and now he's here. He did all of these crazy things for them, and I love working with Lex. Like it was one of the things where I think everyone has someone like this, where the moment you see someone drop a proposal, you immediately want to volunteer to review it. You're like, I'm going to review this. And Lex is one of those people for me, and unfortunately Vicky Free has claimed him, so I've not been able to work with him as much recently. But he's a joy to work with, and working with him on Kobold Zan when that came out, and it got like crazy success. I think if people saw in the poll we did recently about
mission
the
tree.
best MPs, yeah, exactly. Kobold Zan was in top three,
Oh
and
yeah.
was top one for a time. Like it was, the top three were neck and neck. Like they were very close together. And seeing, obviously Lex was the person that made that, but there's a lot of like dopamine you get from reviewing that, from knowing that you've helped make something a better product, if that makes sense. Did it drop down to yes, it dropped down to 4 because of Celestalia, if you include that in the rankings, as Magnes is correcting me on our April Fool's MT that we did. Yeah. With but if you discount Celestalia, which is a bit unfair, it was top 3. But yeah, so I think that's a good example of like the reviewing and kind of uplifting someone, is that you see, like, because it could also be, I, you do get into like polite arguments. Like I'm someone who I quite enjoy thriving off like creative differences and creativity, and ideally you can have those arguments and move past them and help make something better. And it's why, for instance, when I do a lot of reviewing, I try to phrase a lot of my questions or my problems as questions. sorry, I phrased that badly. I try to phrase a lot of my queries or problems or something as a question, because and part of that is because it's a politer way of phrasing some of these issues, but also I think it's helpful to show someone when you're reviewing something that you're not saying this is terrible, this is crap, change it now.
Yeah.
That you're genuinely trying to get on the same page as someone. You're like, hey, so why are we doing this here? Why aren't we doing something else? Explain to me the story, especially in region review, right? It's a bit different in content review and balance review, where those are a bit. I don't want to denigrate them because there is a lot more nuance, but like those are not about a nation story, right? Region
Yeah.
review, our first step is about what does a nation story look like, and then content is broadly about making sure that plays well, and then balance is about making sure that this being good doesn't make other things feel less good by being too broken or even underpowered in some cases. Um, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about reviewing is that creative tension where you're working with somebody else, you're fleshing it out, and you're kind of working with the person you're reviewing. And that's why I also enjoy it when I'm the person getting reviewed, is someone spotting where the story you want to tell could be stronger, where you could explain this better, or where even if you're not going to change something, where actually it's not explained very well. It's one of the things that's a really, that you're exploring this dynamic of here's how we make cool things for the fans, which I was talking about. But like at the end of the day, you want to make cool content for the people, especially because there's always this constant stream of the people that are reviewing your work, and then the wider GitLab audience, and then the Steam update audience. It's so much bigger, and so it's just a lot of fun, kind of going through that process. And like I mentioned, like Lex is a good example of someone who with co-build Zan, that was a very satisfying review because there were troubles during that review, but it came out so well, and I can't take credit for that. Like Lex did all of that, but it's so much fun helping make sure that you helped something be the best it could be. And obviously that's why I think all our contributors are so important, but why review is so helpful too in terms of my favorite reviews. Oh, my favorite reviews. I think the review for a country called oh god, I'm blanking on the name now. Deepwood's Fire Orcs. I'm forgetting their name for the one that aren't the Emerald Orcs. It was LVT's first MT. What are they called again?
Why is it skipping my mind too?
Karakanbar. Yeah, Maggie said that right. Yeah, Karakanbar was a really good review, talking with LVT because it was his first MT, and it was really. And LVT is a joy to work with. He's another really good contributor, but he did like the Luna River Miners and Peshene, if you're familiar with this update. But he was doing Karakanbar, and they were a country I had been like vaguely interested in, but I never got around to doing anything for them. And so it was a lot. It was a real joy for Karakanbar seeing a different take on them and kind of uh, and seeing someone interested in a nation that you saw but that they see differently but have really cool ideas, because that's one of the other joys, right, is that you have a nation that you kind of were interested in but that you never were interested enough to push across the line, and then seeing someone else who did have that vision, who comes in and goes, actually here's what they're going to be about, like here's what I'm doing, here's where we're going to go with this, here's everything that we're going to do. That was a really fun review, especially because, for lack of a better phrase, I got my, I don't say I got my way, but LVT is such a creative person that when you get someone to agree to some of the things you say in review, it kind of, you get that good feeling that you're helping make something better, but also that you're on the same page, like that you're in that harmonious state in terms of what Oni Raven's asking about in terms of my favorite reviews. I would also mention Bishani. That was another LVT review that was really fun. Another one was Vern, which is another one this update. A lot of it was this update because obviously they're fresh in my mind. I'm sure if I went back and looked over what I reviewed for previous updates, they'd be just as I talk about them some more. But those are people that I enjoy working with as devs who are in the core team, and so it's so much. It's so fun being on the same page with somebody and kind of working through that process of making something cool, helping them make it better, asking questions and politely kind of improving upon it. Trying to think of what else could I mention. But yeah, maybe more will come to me. I think we might do a small Q&A at the end.
Yeah. Well, I have that
Um,
planned out as long as you got the
yeah.
time.
I think I should have about like another hour more. I don't want to go on too long, but if we
Okay, yeah.
get to a Q, but but yeah. So that was what reviewing people was like, and basically it got to a point where Armon had taken over. Who's my other co-lead? Armonistan, incredible to work with. One of the stories he tells about how we first met was he was my writing reviewer for the Lilac Wars events, and I was really pernickety about. He helped me out with some really good phrasing, but I came back to him and was like, actually no, but I was really specific with this wording because I don't want to toot my own horn, but there were like a couple of events in the Lilac War stuff where I very deliberately used some language evocative of the moon. You know, like the moon and tides as part of like the whole moon party, rose party thing. And so there was a lot of language that I used that was deliberately like either verdant for some of the rose party events or like evocative of the moon, the tides, and kind of lunar cycles for the moon party events. And so there was a couple of times where I really went back and was like, no, I really want to use this phrasing, even though it's a bit more awkward um, because of that. And he was kind enough to oblige and we worked through it. And there was one of the events too where I was like, hey, I really want to conjure this kind of mental image specifically actually. Can we go back to this and kind of work through it again? So that's an example of how we met, which I guess is also a fun story about how much effort devs can put into what they think about. That we have a lot of devs who I'm sure, like me, are very compulsive and very obsessive about like, this is how I'm going to tell this story. You know, up to it including like event language choice, right? Like not everyone's like that. I'm a bit of an exception sometimes in that like a lot of people will hire a writer for their mission trees. A lot of people will be a writer but they'll get a coder. And part of the reason why I do everything is because I enjoy kind of having that auteur vision, you know, in terms of like a filmmaking terminology. But I really enjoy being able to like go through stuff. But it'll be a lot of fun, and so that's how I met him, and I think we work along really well. Like obviously, a lot of being co-leads is having a good harmony of vision, and there's a lot of time, and like there's some small things we disagree on, but for the most part, we generally are quite aligned on things. And it got to a point where with he ended up taking over the systems team due to some of the previous systems lead leaving, and there needed to be a new systems lead, and so he picked that up in addition to Canal lead. And it got to a point where we were having a little bit of a slowdown, and so this last update, like last November, I want to say, I can probably find when I sent him the message. Maybe it's not leaking too much, but I basically like messaged him and I said, "Hi, I'd really like to be a lead." I basically came out and said it, right? Like I said to him, "I really like the stuff you do, and I'd like to help out with taking some of the burden off this and stepping up to the plate and helping out some more myself. Would you do you think I'm ready?" And I basically asked him in the same way as when I asked to be Canal Core, and I didn't think I was ready, but that I ended up, people said yes. I sent him this message saying, I'd like to step up to the plate. Can you give me any pointers on what more I could be doing? Um, and he basically said, "Oh, actually, I think you're ready now." Not in quite so many words, but he basically said, like, "I think you could do it now. I'll talk to the other leads and we'll see how it goes." And so that's kind of what that's kind of how it works for most people. I think becoming a lead. I'm not sure if Sus is still in the chat. Is he? No, Sus isn't in the chat anymore. But Sus, for instance, became a lead because Labs team was often absent, and he basically kept on asking, like, "Hey, I'm a really active contributor and stuff." Yeah, Karkwin here saying, "Spoiler, it went well." And that was what it was like, you know, like essentially that I was like, I really would like to be a lead. I'd like to help some more people. Would you pass along the word? And Armon basically said, like, hey, I think you could do this. I'll talk to the others and we'll see about how it goes after the update. And lo and behold, after the update, I got a promotion. Yeah, it was only this it was only in January, I think, for me. Although I was quite an active core member, that I'm sure some people, like Scamp, for instance, said in Dev Social, this isn't leaking anything from Leeds. He was like, "Oh, you've basically been, you know, doing this job already in terms of your activity." So, and that's the other thing, I suppose, about being core, about being lead, is that so much of it is giving you a fancy title to let you do more of the things you were doing anyway, and to support
just
more
like in an
people. Yeah.
official position now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sure, like moderator, right? Like, I'm sure you. I don't want to
Well,
put aspersions. Like, I'm sure you have a passion for like helping people behave and stuff. Like, that sounds a bit weird when you phrase it like that, but you know what I mean.
yeah,
Like, I'm sure
no, no.
you were doing the things, and then you just got the title to make sure you could do the things better.
Well, I mean, a little bit there, but you know, I can't go around just spamming at moderators to get people banned or stuff like that. But well, I guess you know if someone's breaking a pretty bad rule. uh,
Yeah, I mean, you could do it like an instant report. Cause
yeah,
my understanding is that there's like a channel for them, so you just like point to your own report, say, "Guys, we need to do this." I'm sure you could do it. But yeah, so that's what it's like when Carwin is talking about his own story. Carwin, who's an art lead and who's like the 3D art lead internally within the art team, and I consider him a good friend. He's quite cool. And so it's one of these things where people step up to the plate, and I think that's one of the things about it that I'd recommend to people is that for me the journey took what, like 2 years, maybe a little bit under. Oh, let me have a look at when I started posting in Anbennar again properly. We'll have a look at this from oldest. So here we go: 2020, 2020, 2020. Oh god. But yeah, so basically, but I think it's something where like, oh, here we go: 2023. But then there was another gap, I think. To 2023, April 2023. So basically, just under 2 months. So, not 2 months, 2 years. What am I saying? But yeah, but that's, and so it's one of these things where obviously that's not a lot of time, but there is a lot of time for a lot of people. And so I do think it's one of those things where like it's never too late to get started, and if like that you can like it's one of those things where I think sometimes people get put off by how old it's been. So 2 months lead fan speed of 80%, yes. Yeah. I think, and so yeah, like that's one of the things I'd say to people is that it's all about putting yourself out there, taking those next steps, and kind of when you're ready for it, asking people and saying like, hey, do you think I'm ready for it? And if you are, and if you've shown that you are, like they'll acknowledge this and stuff. Um, I think that arguably promotions are quite similar, where it's essentially your peers saying, "Yeah, we think you're really good. We want to give you a shiny title to show that you're good and let you do more good things." So I think it's one of those things where, yeah, I mean, and for me, Canol is quite funny. Like like I mentioned, I started off doing technically my onboarding happened in Sarhall in terms of the first thing I PR'd that got me onboarded. And sometimes I threaten to come back there, like come back and do do Zatal now that the Karask kind of slipped away from me, as it were. Um, but I kept myself really busy in Cador. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully leave. But it's a lot of fun, and I think it's one of the other things is that, like I mentioned, with core teams and with leads, it's a very community-driven thing. Like I often joke that Leeds is like a core channel, in that if you ever know what goes on in the average core channel, Leeds are just
just
core
more of
squared.
that.
Like yeah, it's just more of that with the same camaraderie, the same arguments at times, and the same kind of commitment to work together to kind of fix things out. And so I think it's a lot of fun, right? Like, for instance, I have a full-time job, but it's been a strange thing where sometimes development feels easier because of my job than if I was at university, because I kind of have that life puts things into perspective. I don't know what your life situation is, but like for me, I find sometimes I get off work on a weekday and I'm like, okay, I've got 2 hours. Let's spend half an hour on Anbennar and 1.5 hours on something else, and it really helps me focus and do something cool, but also hang out with some people that I really enjoy speaking to on the internet. So yeah. Hello.
Oh,
Hello.
hello.
Yeah.
I
Hello.
can hear you.
I didn't know.
I just
Oh, I
wasn't
didn't know if we
sure.
cut.
I just
No.
wasn't sure if we're
Yeah.
starting on another topic about
I
yeah.
was potentially good. Yeah, I was potentially going to be more like recommendations, because I think that's something
Sure,
that,
yeah,
like,
yeah. We can go
in
on
terms of But I don't know if you want to cut in first. Obviously, you've
Oh,
been kind
no,
of
no,
talking
no.
about it.
I don't need to cut in anything. This is all about you.
Well, I think
Yeah, so
hopefully that lessons everyone can learn from me rather than
yeah.
me. But yes, um,
No, but yeah, I'm sure it'd be very helpful to everyone in chat and to, everyone who might watch the VOD afterwards who's interested in getting into dev or is kind of just taking the first steps, or maybe they're even midway or wanting to take on more responsibilities with the with Anbennar's development. I'm sure they'd really appreciate hearing any recommendations, advice, experiences to learn from that you've gone through.
yeah. So I think the first thing I'll talk more generally is that one of the things that I recommend to people is play games, read books, watch films. Like listen to music. It sounds really silly, but even though map games are a different genre, right? There's so much inspiration you'll find when you engage at other media. And obviously, I imagine most people engage with media outside of Anbennar, but it's so helpful to like find something you really engage with and figure out how to do an Anbennar take on it, or to look at a concept and go, "Oh, this is really cool, but how would this be different in Anbennar?" And kind of start there. Like, for instance, my most recent project is that I started yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. I don't want to be too besotted. Was a country called Badakan, which is
Oh, I
basically
did.
it's like a celestial themed version of the orcish confrontation with Manaroth in the Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos campaign. If you've ever played that, or people in chat are familiar, which is before World of Warcraft, though, Blizzard made some quite good RTS games actually. And one of these campaigns was about these orcs, right? And they escape this human homeland, and they're like, "We're going to make our own continent," and they go to this place called Kalimdor or whatever. And they have these issues, and a demon comes around, and he goes, "Oh, you'll never be anything else. I'm going to make you. I'm going to make you follow what I want." And the campaign's about you like accidentally following his bidding, and then you kill him right in a cutscene, a classic Blizzard cutscene. The leader of the Orcs Thrall, his best friend Grom Hellscream, dies tragically, killing this demon and liberating orcs from their kind of In Warcraft, they had this fiendish ancestry, right?
Mhm.
And so with Badakan, the idea that kind of came into my head that couldn't quite leave me was, well, what if we did that with angels? What if we had someone who the orcs had this final confrontation with someone who wanted to control them, but we kind of made it a Deus Ex Human Revolution style social dialogue challenge. I don't know if you've ever played Deus Ex Human
Oh, yeah, I
Revolution, but it
played the
has
first
this.
one.
Oh, the first, well, because the first one's the sequel slash, because Deus Ex Human
No,
Revolution is the prequel, or,
I know,
or
I
do you mean
misspoke. I misspoke.
Oh, okay, yeah, no worries. But yeah, that has this like social combat thing where basically you have this dotted line where you've got to persuade someone to do what you want by picking the right options and all this stuff. And obviously that wouldn't quite work in a map game. But the idea of like this confrontation between someone who's getting in your way but who is meaning well and trying to help you, um, and that's why it's like a more positive take compared to Manaroth, right? Like someone who's getting in your way and you have to fight them, but it's like a fight for your soul and stuff. Like that's an example of how I very obviously took some inspiration from a different bit of media, but I was like, okay, well, let's change up some of the parameters here, and we can have this Anbennar spin on them because there's all these different things about the Anbennar orcs compared to the Warcraft orcs. The Anbennar orcs have this whole history of Dukan, which is very different from the orcish history of being infernal and coming from the mirror planet. I forget Draenor. That's it. Yeah. Um, and that's something that I think is, like, yeah, exactly. I think it's and that's one of my recommendations to people, right? Which sounds really silly, but it's just like play other things, experience other media, and think about what you liked about there, and if you can bring the core concepts to Anbennar, like, and whether that be CK3 or Wiki3 or of course EU4, like the we get inspired by the things that we read in Anbennar, but that comes from somewhere else too, and obviously you're going to come with the things that you are interested in and the thing that's already there. So I think I'd say that to people. Um, it's just one of those things where you want to find your inspiration out of the game to then bring into Anbennar and kind of find your own take on, to kind of find that synthesis between a really the uniqueness, but also that core thematic premise that you hopefully can kind of come back to. Because I think if you have if you have that core premise that you want to work towards, so much of the problems you might have with creativity and being stumped can be solved because you can keep coming back to this and just add a new twist to the equation, as it were. And I think when it comes to like getting involved in game dev, in terms of Anbennar dev, take breaks is one of my recommendations. I don't really take formal breaks, but I do. I'll be honest. I limit my time with Anbennar a lot of the time. Not like take a fully break, but I make sure that I'm not spending too much time, um, doing this, spending all my time doing it. I make sure that I'm doing other things so that I never get burnt out. But if you're not a lead, in terms of if you haven't got any like review requirements, I just recommend taking a break. Do the thing you want to do, take a break, go away and do some other stuff, and come back. No one's going to begrudge you going away. And obviously, Cargwin and Elidia Path in the chat were talking about how the community is so nice that sometimes you're never going to take that break. That we're just so good, people keep coming back. But I think that's something I'd recommend. And I think like I talked about throughout this whole interview, one of the best ways to put yourself forward is to just put yourself forward. Ask questions, get involved, talk to devs, and just kind of just go on break and don't tell anyone. Maybe don't do that. Maybe
Just
but
leave the server without telling anyone all of a sudden.
yeah. But I think but yeah. So it's just one of those things where I think, yeah, exactly. So there's some of the things I recommend to people is basically you want to put yourself forward, but you want to also make sure that you're leaving time for yourself,
yeah.
because yeah, and I think that really helps too when it comes to everything else, is to just kind of like find that balance, and it really shows, like yeah, exactly. And so
Well, I mean, I feel like that's a good advice for really doing anything. I mean, anything you do out of passion, you can easily burn out on, and it also your professional work. But I feel like the best ideas I get for things is when I'm not actively doing them. I feel like I'm so bogged down in the idea that what I'm working on that has to be this certain way. It's not until I step back that just like, oh, this is an option. This could be good.
yeah. So I think that's a good time to maybe switch over to a Q&A, and I'm going to very quickly get myself another drink because it's very hot in the UK. I don't know if it's like boiling where you live, but my
It's
part of the UK is also the part most hit by the heat wave, or some of the most hit. So I'm cooling myself down a lot.
no. Go ahead. We'll start collecting some questions in the chat. So yeah, if you're in the chat, you can go ahead and start sending out them questions. Alright, just start opening up a notepad and copy and paste name and question. Oop, didn't mute myself. Whew. I mean,
Hello, I'm back. And I
hello.
just want to give, obviously, to everyone in chat, a big thank you to Dangerous Situation, who's obviously the person who's been doing the interview. You've been a star, and I think for volunteering to do this to help me with setting up these huge tech, these the glowy up things, and for also like doing everything. I think you and the community team have been a big help, and so big props to you guys.
Oh, thank you. I don't think I've done too much, but I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. No, I mean, of course, thank you for having this interview. Making taking the time out of your day to do this and start. Well, we've been trying to interact with the community more and set up these streams and other activities. So it's really appreciate you helping us with that goal.
I think I don't know how many questions we have. I can see. I think there's 2 in the chat. Maybe we'll get some more, but you give it like 10 minutes, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. In terms of not
I mean, we
sticking
we
around
could
too long.
start going. I can collect them while they
Okay.
come in. We got a question from Magni. What MTs currently in development are you looking forward to?
MT is currently in development. Oh, that's a good question. I mentioned Karask was the country I did national ideas for, and that I found the take on their MT not what I would have expected, having written their national ideas, but it looks a lot of fun. Like I think it's had a bit of a awkward phase, but I think that's what I'm really interested to see how people react to it, because it'll be the first nation I've done national ideas for that have their MT made, and so even though there've been some problems and that have been largely worked out, I'm just so interested to see how people react to it. The development that's been done there by let me give them a name check just so I'm not speaking vaguely. But the development been done by that's why he's called Enwar, which I always uncomfortable saying, because if people aren't familiar, Enwar is a fictional slur from Morrowind that the Dunmer use for people, and it's always a username that I'm like, why do we? I don't want to be silly, but I always find it a bit silly because it's like it obviously begins with N for a reason, right? Like it's a very obvious allusion. And so I always find it a bit uncomfortable. Yeah. Um, but that's what I'm really excited about. What else am I excited about? It's been on and off. I think in the chat, I don't want this to come across like I'm putting pressure on, but Enleave had a really cool draft for Thornicade. Hang on, I'll search on Discord right now. That I really liked. I thought it looked really cool. It had like shadow magic and stuff. And obviously, there's a lot of things that are piled up there. I don't want to say that you have to, but that's what I'm really interested in. Um, are there any in Canada that I'm waiting? I mean, obviously, everything in Canada I'm interested in. That's why I'm naming other regions, because I kind of it's almost assumed that I'm interested in. Oh, not shadow magic. Then sorry, I'm thinking of maybe it was a different term. But yeah, so Canada, everything Canada. What else am I interested in? I'm not sure. I guess to double check what's going on with it, but I think Wanzi, the Taters River Doge tag team for the vampire. Well, not they are vampires and they're not vampires. The Jiangxi in Hellas. Yeah, they had a really interest. No, it's like that's the right country, but they
Jinkyu?
but yeah, Jinqui. Sorry, yeah, Jinqui. I said it wrong. And they're yeah, they're Jiangxi in terms of that's what the creature's called. Sorry, is that
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
yeah, the vampires. And then Bulwark. So Bulwark MT's thing. I'd be what's currently in development in Bulwark. I mean, it's part of Sarhol now, Streammarker. Like I don't recognize this Bulwark region. Let me have a look at what open threads there are in Sarhol, just so I can see. Zocco is done. Actually, what MT is it? Just your one? I don't want to. I don't know. Just if you, I don't know, because
Sorry.
we've got. Hello, sorry. No, there's yeah. What else is there in Bulwark? Is it just the what's it called? Overclan? Are there any other Bulwark MTs in production I'm blanking on? Please don't forget. Yeah. Oh, High Turner Alley. I didn't realise that was in development still. I thought that was an old one. But yeah, I think probably Overclan. I really like them. They're interesting. I think they're cool. I'm for Dwarvar. If I have to quickly name Dwarvar one, two of my favorite developers, LVT and Magni's in the chat. They recently dropped a themes proposal for the Obsidian Legion. I've actually never played them, the Obsidian Legion at all, so maybe it'll be a first time for me. Yeah, and then I think those are the ones that are in active development, because I think that's what Magni said. Yeah, so hopefully that's a lot of them. I think those are the ones I'm interested in, and like I said, everything in Canada I'm interested in, partly because it nearly always comes across my desk as a lead, so I'm kind of inherently interested because I'll probably be seeing it. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any ones you're interested in?
Oh gosh. I mean, I'm very interested in not necessarily Zol. I don't know if it's started work yet though. The crocodilian. Lizard Folk Nation? I'm not entirely sure if it started work. I've not checked on that, but just a different take of the lizard folk
And so on. Yeah.
destiny,
Yeah.
and I am also very much looking forward to. I'm just saying nations I'm looking forward to. I don't know if all of these or any of these are in development, I guess.
That's fair.
But
We could.
the Bashidi, I'm really looking forward to mission trees there. More Mengi. I love Mengi. I love Shaloka Mengi and Avel Ava really bit. So more Mengi is great, and I also want to Fengoala.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just shouting out names. Don't know if anything's going on there, but hopefully somewhere.
No, fair enough. Yeah. Lots of Sarhol there. Scamp is a big inspiration for me. In terms of lead to lead stuff, I guess I didn't mention his name actually, but Scamp is someone who really inspires me in terms of his role as a region lead. So I think, yeah. So I don't think it's a surprise that you're interested in Sarhol because I think he does a really good job there.
I love Sarhol. Sarhol is great. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for everything Anbennar, really.
Yep.
Unless there is something else you wanted to touch on. Well, I guess I kind of touched on it. I don't know if there's Mengi or Magni also had another question on MTs that I guess I kind of touched on. At least if none of the nations I mentioned were being worked on. What are some MTs you're hoping developers will pick up? I guess both in Canor and just in general.
In Canor, I think I really like to see the last nations on the map in Canor get their mission trees, especially in some regions that are really like close to completion. Because I think it's nice when you have that complete feel. So I think Iacand is coming out. That's cheating, actually. No, Iacand is. I would have asked Iacand before. That's a cool one. But like Lassian, Icand's not on the map. Sorry, it's a formable for Portman. For Portnam, it's they're gnomes. They're evil and very funny. Trin is wicked in terms of some of the stuff I read that she had in mind, and it's very inspiring. But like Lassian, for instance, is just north of Rubyhold. Lassian. Yeah, they haven't got a mission tree. I think they could do some cool stuff. I think partly why I'd really be interested in seeing someone pick them up is partially because they would be a bit difficult to develop for. So if someone came with them with a pitch, I'd be so interested in seeing it, right? I think and that's kind of a common theme to a lot of ones I'm interested in. I think who else would there be that I'm really interested in? I think that's most of it, to be honest. Like I mentioned, like lots of Canal stuff I'm interested in seeing more MTs for. I think so many of the big tags are covered. I'm not really sure we have any. Like obviously, Thorn Cost, that's a good one. Thorn Cost is another Linkori one, the very bottom, the south. They had an MT in development briefly, but it's kind of not really. There's not really one going on. I think they're really cool. I think, and they had a pitch before, so it would be nice to see them got some love. But yeah, I think that's two I pick in Canor, and then outside of Canor, who would I pick? Who do I find interesting? I think most of the tags I find interesting outside of Canor actually have MTs as the thing, and that's why it's really hard to pick one that doesn't have an MT. I guess. Oh, I'm gonna say it. Dark scales. I think dark scales. Dark scales are one. If not for being married to Canor, I would genuinely be like, I'd learn how to play the Dwarvar properly just to make dark scales because they are just like. Part of me loves the challenge of like cursed tags, and so like dark scales is like I'm like I'll break the curse. I will take the ring to Mordor. Yeah, you're like I will take the ring.
Folks.
So like no, but like I'd have to. I really liked Wag's previous proposal. I got along with Wag when he was around. I haven't kept in touch with him, but it's like I would love to do Dark Tales. Not because I like the kobolds, but mainly just because I believe in curse being broken. I believe in destroying. I believe maybe this is like my hero's hubris. That I'm like, oh, I can do this, guys. Don't worry. Like, but it'll be like the 13th labor that kills me or something. Um, so, so I think those are the ones that I'm really interested in. Um, is there any others? I think not really. Like, 'cause I think like most of the other regions, all the cool MTs are done,
Mhm.
or at least all the ones that I find cool are done. I don't want to say that like other people don't find their own ideas that are really interesting, and so I'm more interested in like finding the MT I would never have expected from these regions. So that's why it's kind of hard for me to say, oh, I'm excited for this country because I kind of want to be surprised if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean,
That like yeah.
one random small one province minor might become your favorite, just based off someone's dedication and creativity.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, actually, here's a really funny leak I can tell you. So I mentioned Zatal before, right? The first country to national ideas for. They were actually used in the Leeds channel as an example of the most irrelevant country you could ever imagine, and someone making like a 75 mission tree for them. So if you want an example of how I know how to pick them, that's a funny example of that phenomenon. But
I mean,
yeah.
it's fate at this point.
So yeah,
I know you had mentioned
that was it.
maybe coming back home for that, but
Yeah, there was also someone who I really like, who I think is busy, but getting married and having a really fulfilling personal life called Redfuzz, who
Mhm.
was also kind of interested in them. So if she never comes back and does them, then maybe I'll come back and do them. But yeah, but yes, I think that's been my answer for that question. Do you have any others you'd want to answer for that question?
Oh,
Obviously, you
I
kind
mean,
of
I already
did
answered
both at the same
plenty.
time.
But I guess I like cider, so I'd love to see the Pairview and Appleton rivalry driven in code. Mission Tree is just about screwing each other up, or something like that. I don't know.
That'd be a lot of fun. Yeah. I guess next question.
All right. We also had a. Hopefully, I didn't miss any big ones. I had one from Karguin on what if you could have anything on Halan 3D modeled, what would it be? No
So
units, no units.
no units, yeah. See, that's the thing, like, because the obvious joke answer here that everyone knows we're Cargwen. I'm not even going to say it because Carg will be mentally filling in the blanks of what 3D models you'd mention when it comes to units. But I think otherwise, what would I pick? I have no idea, actually. I must admit, I'm a bit of a bare bones gamer when it comes to 3D models, where it's like, I really care about graphics in like RPGs and
Mhm.
shooters and like games where you really explore those environments. But like on a map game, I don't play on like performance modes, but I just don't pay as much attention to most 3D map objects as much. Like I think like sometimes I do notice them and they're really cool, and I think that's the power of 3D models, right? Is that most of the time you don't notice something and then suddenly bam, like the stone lions here, they're really cool. Um, no, of course,
Walls.
Colin. I'm just explaining like why I struggle to think of something that would be cool. Um,
Is it here?
I think the white walls I think are so cool. That's what I think that's one of something Cargwin did. I just think it's so cool because of how imposing they are on the map. In terms of visualizing something, uh, I think it would be really interesting to what would I pick? Oh, the Dune Worms,
Oh, I
another
know, right?
another Cargwin
And then
classic.
there's
Oh,
there's also some here too,
oh, that's really cool.
right?
Oh, yeah,
I'm not
maybe
seeing it
not.
right. Is that Mid
Uh,
Bucket? Maybe.
Maybe I don't know. Like maybe they got removed. I don't know. Oh, we should have another zoo. There you go. That'll be the 3D math objects I
Zoo.
want. I want to restore the zoo. We need to restore the zoo. We need to restore the zoo somewhere in the farthest northern reaches of Garudia. Um. What else would be cool to visualize? I think I'd really like to see something. I think we did remove the zoo. I'm not
Oh
sure.
yeah, the Guardian Zoo's not there anymore. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no all of this is
Yeah.
actually land now. There's no well, I guess here. There's like no more
And no,
wasteland.
I could like, no, how dare you? I think if I had to pick something, I would like to pick something like Oh, I think I picked like a surface hold. I think I picked like ruby hold or something because
Oh,
ruby hold's been interesting to me
no, sorry.
because I don't want to make Magni feel bad, but they're like one of my favorite. They already have something here, but I just have always loved the concept of them because they're just like they just didn't get touched really. So you just have to imagine this like internal dwarven city that was just like not destroyed by not destroyed by orcs and everything. Like like what would that really look like? Because we have the funny dev numbers, right? Like, but how many dwarves? I know Magni, if I know. Um, but we have the funny dev numbers, but it's like really imagining the scale of what Ruby Hold must look like. Especially because it doesn't really have any humans in it in game, but you kind of do have to imagine that there'd be a lot of like tourists and stuff, and like what does that industry look like and everything. Obviously, that's in the rose gates and stuff.
No, yeah, it's
But yeah,
outside. Sorry.
yeah. So Ruby Hold, I think would be one cool. Otherwise, Anbin cost. I think it'd be really cool if we could make like a bespoke 3D model instead of the dev 3D model for Anbin cost. Although I'm not sure how jank that would be, because I think it'd be really fun to see like
The different
the city of
districts,
the
or
world. Yeah, exactly. Like especially seeing like, can you imagine if you could see the elven ships docked, like the massive life ships that carried
oh
them
yeah,
to
the
Anban, like seeing them docked in the Silver Docks district, I think is what it's called. That would be a really cool visual, I think. The
and also in
but yeah,
Brisson too.
yeah, exactly. Yes, there's one in Brissan, but then that one leaves Fairyland here. And there's also one in Kel Maldor, too. But yeah, that'll be what I pick. Would you have an idea of what you pick?
Not to go back to Altotunger, but I'd love to see the gate into the mountain. That'd be pretty cool. Besides that, I mean, we already have Great Phaeton. Phaeton's also one of my favorite nations, and we have these amazing little balloons going all about. Um, I don't know. There's a lot of cool stuff that's already around if you look for it. Is there
Yeah.
anything particular? I don't know. Not that I can think of immediately.
Mm, so
Yeah.
I guess next question maybe.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything lined up. I think I nabbed everything from the chat.
Well, let's
So
quickly
I guess let's give it a couple of seconds, minutes, etc. Um,
let's have a quick look.
Something on silent repose? I mean, I don't know if there's anything churning there, or there's any
Yeah, silent
before or anything.
repose. Yeah, I mean that'd be fun. I think there'd be a lot of interesting stuff you could do there. Where would it be? Who was asking? There was someone else asking something. Oh, right. There were some random questions, like for instance, Raptors asked about Adventurers Wanted system. Will it be fixed? If there's any bugs, obviously you can report those on the Discord. But otherwise, we are, there has been an Adventurers Wanted rework system that's kind of been cooking away. I can't speak to what if it'll be next update or not. But I think it's fair to say that nearly everyone I speak to, including those on the project, are excited about it. It's just kind of if it pans out or not.
I've
Uh,
seen little
unfor-
bits and pieces, and it's really something neat. So when that
yeah.
comes to fruition.
And then we have a question here about like very quickly. What determines the characteristics of how different the tags of a race can be? I think that depends on the country. It depends on the species. It depends on the region. So, like for instance, brown orcs, if they have to get MT content, will be very different than green orcs and black orcs and everything. And I think it's always just about finding the thematic niches of things and kind of making space for how would I put it? Making space for like it's like because you always want to make sure it's that balancing act of making something that fits the country you want while preserving any thematic niches for other countries. And I think that's that's like I think one of the classic things that people can sometimes get annoyed at, say with Black Orcs, that Black Orcs seem to just be like savages for all of history. And it's like not really true, but the reason why they have that narrative is so that in EU4 you can build the first Black Orc country, right? And I think that's kind of the bargain you make, right? Is that you have some cultures and stuff that are in like semi-stasis, so that you can have them be at their most dynamic in game, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think that's interesting, right? What other questions do we have? Let's quickly go through. Is there more coming for 2832? If you're still in the chat, Booster, I have no idea what you meant by that. So if you want to clarify what you meant by content for 28, yeah. Very quickly, what region do you think? And here's a question from D0MAT. What region do you think needs more content? Well, I think the obvious joke answer there is Insia, because they need to be merged. But I think slightly more seriously, Grisehood, maybe? Is that what you meant? Well, troll. I'm not sure what troll tag you meant there. But yeah, so I think most regions are doing really well, right? Like, and obviously I'm a channel lead, so I'd feel a bit uncomfortable talking about like other regions that need work. I think at the end of the day, it's something where I think there are certain regions that aren't to my taste, and the way I handle that is by politely not playing in them and not moaning about how dare people enjoy them that do, because that's I think one of the joys of having a big map like this, is that certain people will not enjoy every region, but that you have enough regions that you can hopefully have like 2 or 3 that you really enjoy and that you can keep coming back to. So yeah, see, I'm inspiring people to work on Insia just like that, which is great. Oh, you meant Digo Vader, Boostar. Yeah, Digo Vader, there's a mission tree in development for them. I'll have to double check the thread now, actually. Is it waiting for me? No, Digo Vader is Forest Trolls. Are they waiting for me?
Did I spell it wrong? Oh, it's a unique character for the D. That's
yeah, it's a new character, because I don't think it's actually yeah. I think it's Digo Vader. I think how it's actually pronounced. It's like a th instead of a duh, if I understand it correctly. The special character. But I always say, that's why I mispronounce it. So yeah, so that's in progress. I think. Yeah, Figo Vader. There you go. I thought the D was a normal D. Is it not a normal D either? No, it's Figo
Thorns,
Vader.
I think they're called.
Yes, I think it is Thorns, yeah. This is why I kind of hate special characters and why Vangheim never got renamed, because I was like, for a lot of people, are gonna spell it, are gonna pronounce it really wrong, and like sometimes anyway. So yeah,
The only issue I see with it here is that you can't really search for it.
Yeah, because yeah. But yeah, Digaversa, or Vigaversa rather, you can tell I do not speak Danish or Norwegian, Icelandic, etc., Swedish. But yeah, that's got a mission tree. Last I checked, it was still in development. I can ping him right now. You know what? Because you've asked about it so kindly, I'll ask, how's progress on this?
Drag him into
it's also no. Just checking in. If we can support, there we go. This is what. Yeah. Anyway, now what are we else? Yeah. So that's it. Very quickly, any other questions? We remove the zoo. Yeah, I guess there's no way to represent a hold on the map. I think maybe this will be like the last couple of questions. I don't want to keep you too long. I guess it'd be a question from Cycling Rhino. How irritating is it to have incomplete MTs? Well, we're very lucky that I don't think in Canal we have any incomplete MTs. We have MTs that are smaller than you might expect. MTs that where the formable has no MT. But last I checked, I don't think. Oh, BPEC, I guess, that hasn't got Starhole. There are some things that need like their Starhole extensions, most of which has been done, or would be due for like maybe a full-on revamp. A Diet. Okay, if yeah, I thought the form was something. Anyway. Yeah, so you have the Starhole placeholder. Same with Eberthil and Busalar. Busalar has a mission tree in development, kind of, sort of. Eberthil also does. So most of these placeholders should be gone soon, basically. Yeah. And that's part of what Forsaken, who people might know, he's part of the community team. He's incredible. And he's been doing a lot of work revamping things that had placeholders to remove the placeholders and put in that Starhole content. He did it for Royal Sard, for Moonhaven, for Wineport. He's great. And maybe he'll come back to some of the other ones. But like I said, Busalar and Eberthil are both like in semi-active development for like revamps. And Magni mentions Castellar, which is Castellar is just a really old MT. It's not it's an MT that there's nothing wrong with it inherently. It's just not it's just not very modern, right? Like it was literally, I think, one of the first MTs made, maybe even made before public release. Because I remember Council League into Castellar was one of my first games. And that's why I went back to do the Council League rework, because EU4 the game changed, so the MT didn't work as well as it used to do. So I think with Castellar, yeah, it's a bit of a different situation. But yeah, I think theoretically some people have had interest in reworking it, but no one's ever submitted a formal. No one has ever submitted a formal proposal. So maybe if they do, I'd be interested in seeing that. I'd be very happy to do the rework for it. Put it that way. And review that, because I love the Castellarians. They're very fun, and because they lose in canon, there's a lot of like interesting space to like imagine what could have been in terms of that freedom. But yeah. What else would I say? Yes, incomplete MTs. There aren't any. Of course, the most infamous example of this is Dangun, which had an MT which is in the very far east. It's the Korea equivalent, the one that that one, yeah. They had a mission tree that was like developed, and it was actually in the game, sort of, but then there were like upload issues that meant that like half of it got lost, and the creator of it just gave up because he couldn't get it back, which is a really sad story, right? And obviously that's why we hopefully have a lot of great people who are really helpful with getting you to fix your Git and stuff like that. Our code reviewers, some of the members of the content team, they're great. If you ever need help, you can obviously reach out to them and talk to them. There are some times where I swear, okay man, like searches for, I'm having Git problems, and he like will find your post even if you don't ping him. Please do not like assume that he'll always be there. But like so many times I'm like, I feel like I'm talking to the void of a problem, and he'll respond and help me, and he's incredibly kind. He's one of our PR mergers. He's great.
He's part of our relatively new code reviewer team as well.
Yes, exactly. And he's great. Like, okay, man, fantastic. The mod doesn't exist without him. But yeah, so him and people like him make sure we don't have that problem in the future.
Leader of the
yeah,
that is right.
So yeah, I think that's all the questions in terms of that we have.
If anybody has a last minute question to send out, or else we'll start wrapping up here. Give you 10 seconds. Alrighty, I think we are gonna wrap up here. Alright, well, I don't know if there's any last statement you wanted to say. Thank you very much for taking the time to come out here again. You know, we really want to start connecting the wider community with the development team, and you know, showing off the great work that y'all do and the great stories y'all have. So yeah, again, thank you for coming out here. Is there any last statement you want to leave people with?
Well, I think the last thing I'd say is that obviously, first of all, quick promo for the next stream. I'm potentially doing one with Katten talking about Covenblad. We joked about it a little bit, but going like really in depth, especially because I think it's a good example of like so many things not to do. And speaking as someone who likes to think he's learned from his mistakes while still enjoying parts of them, I'm hoping it'll be a really informative stream for anyone who's interested in development to hear about some of the struggles I had and a lot of the ways in which that's going to be common for your first contribution and how you can kind of push through it, how you can work with people, all of these different things. And if you're interested in development, and that could be that might be next weekend, we're hoping with Katten, but we'll see. But otherwise, I think the thing I'd say is that like, if you're interested in development, you know, join the Discord. I think it should be linked in the description of this. Actually, it might not be. But you can find it online or the Twitch channel. I was thinking. I'm not sure it's linked on the.
It is also attached to the.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Well.
It's one of the button. Yeah, sorry, it's a button rather than linked to the description. My apologies. But yeah, so I think it's one of those things where I'd really recommend just kind of getting stuck in, popping a message, joining a server, and looking around. And if you ever do want to get involved with development and you're, unsure, anyone who's in the chat who's on the server, I'm sure will be happy to help out a little bit. Obviously, it might be a bit slow if you message us out of the blue, but it's one of the things where we're always interested in having new people get involved. If you're a content creator and you ever want to talk to any of us, I'm sure a lot of us would be happy to spend some time. We're all professional yappers, as the phrase goes. You can see a lot of us on calls and stuff, just hang out with each other, and so yeah, we'll be there for if anyone ever wants to talk or anyone wants to help get involved. I'm happy to respond, and so are our brilliant mod team and the community at large. And thank you. Without you, it's not possible.
Cargoin saying if you're an artist, he will immediately reply to you. So if you're interested in any part of the community, be it just the community itself, getting involved with the wider group, or specifically dev, any team would be happy to have you out here and answer your questions about what it would take to join. All right. Well, thank you again for coming out here and, well, calling in here, I guess, and taking the time to share your story. Really appreciate it. And I
Thank you
guess,
for hosting.
sure, no problem. I guess until next time, fellow Anbennarians. We believe we're having a stream next week, but we'll see how it goes. And
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed, fingers crossed. It won't be me, unfortunately, but fingers crossed. All right, well, until next time, Anbennarians, we'll see you later. Thanks for joining the stream.